At 5:14 local time in the northern Strait of Hormuz, the first warning does not rise from the horizon. It appears on a screen. Inside the Combat Information Center, a surface warfare operator leans in as 4 new tracks flare to life across the tactical display. Fast, low, closing from the north-northeast coastline. For a fraction of a second, the room goes silent. Then everything shifts at once. Multiple inbound contacts, bearing 038, speed high, altitude low. On the flag bridge of the U.S. aircraft carrier, the deck still feels steady beneath every step. Controlled, routine, almost ordinary. The ship continues through the strait in tight formation, destroyers ahead and astern, a cruiser offset to port. The entire strike group moves with the calm precision of a force built to endure the worst decisions others might make. The sea is smooth enough to catch the first light. The sky is only beginning to brighten. Then the carrier's internal circuit cuts through the calm. General quarters! General quarters! All hands, man your battle stations. There is no hesitation, no confusion, only alarms, steel, and instant movement. Below deck, sailors move quickly without wasting energy. On the flight deck, yellow shirts and brown shirts turn toward the island as the warning rolls across the ship. 2 FA-18 Super Hornets, still chained down after the last recovery cycle, sit motionless beneath the dim deck lights. Nearby crew members stop, listen once, and move with intent. No one needs an explanation. The announcement has already said enough. In CIC, the picture becomes clearer. The cruiser to port confirms the same tracks on its Aegis display. Moments later, the destroyer ahead reports identical returns. That ends any hope of clutter, phantom echoes, or sensor error. 3 ships, 1 picture. The contacts are real. Their profile matches low-flying sea-skimming threats. The carrier strike group is not crossing open water. It is moving through one of the narrowest and most dangerous waterways on the planet, where reaction time collapses and every stretch of coastline can conceal a launcher. In a place like this, there is no space for hesitation. A tactical action officer steps closer to the display. Time to outer engagement window, under 2 minutes. Across the ship, watertight doors slam shut, weapons elevators stop, damage control lockers open. On the bridge, no one raises their voice. The captain does not need to. One look at the repeater feed is enough. Set condition 1, engage confirmed hostile tracks. The order moves cleanly through the formation. On the destroyer screening ahead of the carrier, vertical launch cells are already receiving target assignments. In CIC, the strike group's defensive layers begin to build almost automatically, not through improvisation, but through repetition drilled so deeply it has become instinct. Outer layer first, then the middle layer, then point defense if anything slips through. Above the formation, an E-2D Hawkeye adjusts slightly in its orbit and feeds fresh data into the network. The airborne picture adds a darker detail. 2 smaller contacts trailing behind the fast movers, higher and slower. They could be decoys, they could be drones. Either way, this is not a random shot from shore. It is a coordinated assault package. A flight deck officer looks up and catches the first faint streak far off the bow, so low it nearly blends into the gray-blue water beyond it. He does not hear it yet. He only sees movement where there should be none. On the island, cameras and lenses swing toward the threat axis. Every second is now counted, logged, and called out somewhere aboard the ship. Contacts holding course, range decreasing, no IFF. Hostile confirmed. The first interceptor assignment flashes across the network. Forward screen destroyer, SM-2 selected. Inside CIC, no one treats that as victory. Assigning an interceptor is not the end of the danger. It is only the next step between survival and impact. And through it all, the carrier keeps moving. That matters. There is no sudden evasive turn, no panic rippling through the formation. The escorts tighten their spacing just enough to shield the center of the group, while electronic warfare teams flood the battle space with energy, studying seeker behavior and searching for the signature of whatever was launched from shore. Off the starboard side, a phalanx mount shifts a few measured degrees toward the inbound axis. Not enough to look dramatic, just enough to show that it is alert. Then one of the tracks drops even lower. A watchstander says it quietly, but everyone hears it. The sea skimmer just slipped below the clutter line. For a moment, the incoming contact almost disappears into the surface of the water itself. On the bridge, the captain keeps his eyes forward. In CIC, the weapons officer does not hesitate. Engage. Miles ahead of the carrier, a destroyer's launch cell snaps open. The first American interceptor drives into the morning sky on a pillar of fire, climbing hard above the strait before curving toward the incoming track. On the flight deck, heads turn. On the radar display, the geometry tightens. 2 missiles now, one outbound and one inbound, racing toward a single point in space where one of them is about to end its run. And behind that first threat, 3 more are still closing. The interceptor reaches the top of its climb, rolls, and dives back toward the water. In CIC, no one blinks. 1 heartbeat later, the first inbound track disappears. Splash 1. There is no cheer, no release, only the next report. 3 more inbound. 2 high contacts still trailing. Possible decoys holding offset. That intercept buys the strike group a few more seconds. Not safety. Ahead of the carrier, the screening destroyer stays locked on the threat axis, its spy radar pouring fire control data into the network. To port, the cruiser picks up the second sea skimmer as it slices low across the strait, using the curve of the water and the haze of dawn to stay hidden for as long as possible. It is fast enough to cripple a ship, low enough to arrive with almost no warning. Track 2, holding terminal profile. That means it is no longer searching. It already knows where it is going. The carrier's bridge remains almost unnervingly calm. The captain studies the repeater display. The officer of the deck keeps the ship steady. No sharp turn, no broken formation. The escorts are doing exactly what they were built to do. Absorb the first shock, extend the carrier's vision, and stop anything trying to break through. Inside the Combat Information Center, the defensive wall shifts to its second layer. Cruiser engaging. SM-2 away. This time, the interceptor launches from the port side of the formation, flaring bright against the early morning gloom before vanishing into the distance. On the tactical display, the geometry closes fast. The incoming missile keeps pressing in. The interceptor races to meet it. Then, for half a second, both symbols merge. The inbound track flickers. Then it remains. Missile still airborne. Possible partial intercept. Track continuing. That changes everything. The first intercept was clean. This one was not. Whether the blast damaged the missile or only pushed it slightly offline, it is still moving toward the formation. And now, there is less room, less time, and far fewer simple options. Time to inner layer, 38 seconds. That number lands harder than any alarm. On the flight deck, the sound finally arrives, a distant tearing roar rolling low across the water. Crew members crouch instinctively behind equipment and blast deflectors, eyes fixed on a threat they still cannot clearly see. They do not need to see it. The ship sees it for them. That is the only reason they still have time. High above the carrier group, the E-2D Hawkeye sends another update. The 2 high contacts trailing the missiles are separating. One drifts west, the other starts descending. Not random, not debris. A coordinated package. Possible drones meant to force the formation to divide its attention. The tactical action officer keeps it simple. Do not chase the decoys unless they commit. Take the leakers first. That is the discipline of naval air defense. You do not fire at what merely looks dangerous. You fire at what is about to arrive first. The damaged sea skimmer breaks through the outer screen and races toward the inner layer, barely above the waterline now, throwing a faint wake of spray beneath it. Its seeker is still active. Its course is still lethal. ESSM responds immediately. From the nearest escort, a smaller missile leaves the launcher with less spectacle and far more urgency, built precisely for this kind of close-range geometry. It cuts out low, skimming just above the sea, hunting the incoming threat in the final stretch before impact. On the display, the 2 tracks rush toward each other in silence. Then the screen clears. Splash 2. A few shoulders ease, but only for a second because the 3rd hostile contact is already pushing in from starboard. It is lower than the others were, either smarter or simply luckier. Hard to know. It stays buried in surface clutter until the destroyer on the carrier's right flank catches it late and without much margin. New leaker bearing 051. Very low, very fast. The carrier does not turn. It cannot afford to break formation now. Instead, the escorts shift the shield around it. Electronic warfare teams saturate the sector with interference. Decoys stand ready. Phalanx mounts complete their slow, deliberate turn toward the new axis. At last, the 3rd missile becomes visible. A sharp silver line over dark blue water, coming in so low it seems to split the sea open ahead of it. CIWS, hold, hold! The bridge crew watches in silence. At this range, there is no space left for drama. The missile enters point defense range. CIWS, engage. The phalanx opens up. The sound is not a single blast. It is a mechanical scream, a harsh metallic roar that swallows every other thought. A stream of tungsten rips out across the water. For one impossible second, the incoming missile keeps coming, straight through it. Then it breaks apart. Fragments tumble across the surface. A low, dirty flash erupts off the starboard quarter. The shockwave rolls across the water and thumps against the outer hull of the nearest escort. Debris rains into the strait, but the carrier remains untouched. Splash 3. No one says it twice because one of the high contacts suddenly drops and accelerates. Not a decoy anymore. A drone, maybe more. The final confirmed inbound is not trying to outrun the formation. It is trying to outlast it, arriving late, after the interceptors, after the first wave of relief, after the natural human urge to breathe too soon. That is when the battle group's radar picture tightens again, and the cruiser reports something worse than another drone. A brief radar spike from the Iranian coastline, then another fire control pattern. A second launch corridor may already be opening. The first wave is dying over the water. The next one may already be on the way. For 7 seconds after the last explosion, the strait goes strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not safe, just quiet, in the way a fight goes quiet, when both sides understand the first exchange is over, and the second one may decide everything. Burning debris from the broken missile drifts across the water, off the starboard quarter. A thin black ribbon of smoke hangs low over the sea. On the carrier's flight deck, no one mistakes that silence for victory. Crew members stay low behind tractors, tow bars, and tie-down points, helmets turned toward the threat axis. The island remains lit. The deck remains ready. Every eye is still working. Inside CIC, the tactical picture does not relax. The 3 confirmed sea skimmers are gone. The late drone is not. Neither are the radar spikes that flashed from the Iranian coastline. Coastal emitters active again. That changes the room. The first wave was never the main event. It was the probe. The real danger is what comes after it, what launch crews on shore do with the seconds gained through confusion, debris, and rapid assessment. The strike group does not waste those seconds. Above the formation, the E-2D Hawkeye tightens its orbit and pushes a denser picture into the network. The cruiser feeds back radar-bearing lines. The starboard destroyer adds passive electronic detections. One of the carrier's intelligence specialists leans over a console, cross-checking emitter behavior against threat libraries loaded long before the ships ever entered the strait. No one says the word trap. They do not need to. Iran fired first. That means every radar sweep, every uplink, every coastal pulse now carries context. The attack has given the carrier strike group something it did not have 1 minute earlier, a live targeting chain to map. Correlating launch azimuth, stand by, stand by. Then the answer appears. Probable origin sector confirmed, northern coastal belt, multiple emitters, 1 search radar, 1 fire control quality source. The captain listens once and gives the order without changing expression. Build the response. That does not mean fire blindly. It means something colder, more precise. On the flight deck, yellow shirts snap into motion. The next launch cycle is no longer purely defensive. It is calculated. An EA-18G Growler is pulled forward first. Wings unfold. The electronic warfare pods are already configured. Behind the Growler, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets are moved into sequence, loaded not for patrol, but for precise work. Their crews move quickly under the deck lights, checking pins, panels, and final data loads with the kind of practiced urgency that looks almost calm from a distance. The carrier is not reacting wildly, it is choosing instruments. Back in CIC, the trailing drone that made it through the first exchange drops lower and begins angling in from the west. Smaller than the incoming missiles, but dangerous for that exact reason. It shows up late when attention is divided. Drone contact committed. The cruiser catches it first. A nearby escort designates. A short-range engagement begins. No dramatic pause this time. No time for one. An interceptor is assigned, launched, and guided cleanly. The drone disappears from the scope. Splash 4. Again, no one marks the moment for long, because the real focus has shifted ashore. The Growler crews are strapped in. Canopies lock. Steam builds beneath the catapult shuttle. Behind them, the Super Hornets wait with noses dipped, engines whining, carrying the kind of ordnance that turns coordinates into consequences. These aircraft are not launching into an easy sky. They are entering a live corridor where coastal radars have already measured the reach of the carrier group and may be preparing to act again. The launch officer points. The Growler goes first. It is thrown down the deck and into the pale morning light, climbing hard over the strait before banking toward the threat sector. The first Super Hornet follows seconds later, then the second. Each jet vanishes into the same narrow slice of sky from which the inbound threats had arrived. Inside the carrier's CIC, the mission shifts from endurance to pursuit. The electronic warfare feed sharpens as the Growler begins its work. Along the coastline, one Iranian emitter wavers, then another. The rhythm changes, search patterns shorten. One fire control signal blinks on, off, then reappears farther inland. They are repositioning. That suggests mobile launchers, coastal batteries, or both. The strike group keeps building the picture. One destroyer remains in missile defense posture over the formation. The cruiser continues scanning for a second wave. A Seahawk helicopter is placed on standby, ready to move beyond the screen if surface contacts begin emerging from the clutter near shore. The carrier itself never stops moving. That matters. In the Strait of Hormuz, the ship that slows or freezes becomes the ship that can be fixed, tracked, and targeted. Then a new contact appears. Fast surface movement, close to the northern coastline. Not commercial, not stationary. A patrol craft or possibly a fast attack boat pushes out from a harbor mouth. Then another follows behind it. The watch officer tags them immediately. They are not yet part of the engagement, but they are not accidental either. Someone on shore is trying to widen the problem. Threats from above, fast boats below, too many angles at once. The captain does not take the bait. Track them, do not break the shield. That is the difference. Iran is trying to reopen the chaos. The strike group refuses to hand it back. Then the first targeting quality update arrives from the air wing. One of the Super Hornets, working with offboard cues and passive support from the Growler, locks onto the radar behavior that matters most. The same fire control source that flashed just before the missile wave. Not an estimate, not a broad sector, a real target. In CIC, the symbol is boxed, verified, and passed up the chain. On the flight deck below, sailors look toward the sky as the sound of the departing aircraft fades into the distance. They cannot see the consoles, they cannot see the target folders, but they can feel the ship changing around them. The first minutes were about staying intact. This minute is about making sure the shore launcher does not get another opportunity. Inside the network, the final call comes through, sharp and simple. Target quality achieved. And somewhere over the strait, an American pilot hears the one instruction the launch crews on the Iranian coast never wanted to hear. Cleared hot. The words are brief, flat, final. Over the northern edge of the strait, the lead Super Hornet holds steady for less than a second, just long enough for weapon release to register cleanly. Then the aircraft brakes slightly offline and keeps moving. No flourish, no hesitation. Beneath it, the strike package separates into rolls with the precision only trained naval aviation can deliver. One jet releases, one covers. The Growler remains ahead of both, filling the battle space with interference and confusion. Back on the carrier, no one sees the release itself. They see the effect. Inside CIC, one of the Iranian coastal emitters begins to jitter. Its search pattern shortens, widens, then collapses into noise as the Growler's jamming reaches full strength. Another source tries to compensate by spiking harder, brighter, more focused. That is exactly the wrong move. The fire control source just surged. That makes it easier to neutralize. The weapons officer on the carrier does not need that explained twice. Neither does the captain. The picture has finally narrowed to the moment every strike group trains for in a real engagement. The threat confirmed, the location refined, the shooter in position, and every supporting asset working in sync. Seconds later, the first target is gone. Not gradually, instantly. A clean symbol on the tactical display flickers, smears, and disappears from the network. On the ISR feed coming in from overhead support, a tight heat bloom bursts outward from the coastline, followed by a second flash rolling through the same spot a moment later. Target 1 silent. No one inside CIC mistakes silence for certainty. But when a coastal radar battery stops transmitting in the middle of a naval confrontation, it has either been knocked out, gone dark, or gone to ground. Any one of those outcomes gives the carrier group room to breathe. Then the second part of the picture starts to shift. Another emitter farther east, likely tied to the same launch corridor, begins moving. It is no longer acting like a system trying to fight. It is acting like a system trying to stay alive. Search arcs turn uneven. Signal quality falls off. The pattern no longer resembles a coordinated coastal defense net. It looks like isolated nodes trying not to disappear one by one. That is the turning point. Only minutes earlier, the strike group was absorbing the first shock of a missile ambush in one of the narrowest waterways on Earth. Now the geometry of the fight has changed completely. Iran is no longer setting the pace, it is reacting to it. On the flight deck, that shift is visible too. The tension is still there. So is the heat. So is the mix of fuel, salt, and burned metal drifting in from the outer screen. But the frantic edge has faded. Deck crews move with the clipped precision of people who know the danger is not over, but also know their side now controls the clock. Ordnance teams begin preparing follow-on loads. Recovery crews check clearances. A handler waves a tractor forward. The carrier is not hiding behind its escorts. It is still operating, still functioning, still pushing forward. That matters more than any speech ever could. To starboard, the destroyer screen remains locked outward. Its spy radar keeps sweeping low across the waterline, searching for anything that might exploit the moment. Another sea skimmer, another drone. A desperate run by fast boats emerging from the clutter near shore. To port, the cruiser holds the broader air picture, tracking every return with the cold patience of a system built for mornings exactly like this. Then the surface picture begins to shift. Multiple fast contacts, northern inshore lane. The patrol craft spotted earlier are now spreading out, not charging, not fully committing, testing, Small, fast, and difficult to read against a crowded shoreline, they move just far enough offshore to suggest pressure without crossing into an unmistakably hostile move. In another situation, that might be enough to divide a captain's attention, rotate assets, maybe even pull aircraft away from the coastal strike problem. Not this time. The carrier group has already learned from the first wave. Do not let the enemy expand the problem faster than you can contain it. A Seahawk lifts off the deck and heads for the outer screen, staying low at first, then climbing just enough to bring its optics and sensors onto the surface contacts below. It does not fire. It does not need to. Its presence alone tells the small boats exactly what the strike group now understands, and exactly what it can do with that understanding. The boats hesitate. One turns first, then another. On the carrier's tactical display, the line of pressure that had been trying to push outward from shore begins to bend back toward the coastline. They are losing momentum. That is the kind of sentence naval officers trust. Not because it sounds dramatic, but because it means the fight is being forced back into shapes that can be managed. Above them, the air wing keeps working. The Growler continues to jam. One Super Hornet swings wider, gathering final confirmation on a second radar source that flashed during the opening missile strike. The other stays in position, ready to act again if needed. The message now moving across the strait is not loud. It is worse than loud. It is precise. If you emit, you are found. If you launch, you are tracked. If you lock onto the carrier group answers faster and harder. Then another coastal signal appears, sudden, sharp, and brief, as if one Iranian crew is gambling on a last-second targeting attempt before pulling away. It lasts only a moment, long enough. Second target correlated. This time the response chain moves even faster than before. No one aboard the American ships is rushing. They simply are no longer operating on assumptions. The first wave gave the strike group every signature it needed. Now the counteraction is running on confirmed behavior, not guesswork. The second coastal source cuts out. Then the shoreline seems to dim. No more sharp fire control spikes. No more stable launch quality behavior. Only scattered search noise, broken communications, and the electronic residue of a coastal defense network that tried to strike a U.S. carrier, and in doing so, exposed itself. From the bridge, the view ahead looks almost unchanged. Water, haze, morning light, and escort ships holding formation in the strait. But beneath that calm surface, the balance has shifted completely. Iran made the first move in an attempt to break the pressure. By the end of the exchange, it is the U.S. Navy deciding which parts of the coastline can still respond. By 6:03 local time, the sky over the Strait of Hormuz is bright enough to wash the last traces of night from everything. The smoke is still there, thin and black, flattened by the morning wind. Off the starboard screen, fragments from the intercepted attack drift across the water, some still flashing orange for a moment before the sea pulls them under. Farther north, the Iranian coastline sits under a pale layer of morning light. Quiet now, or at least quieter than it was 20 minutes earlier. No new fire control spikes, no fresh launch tracks, no hard radar lock behavior reaching back toward the carrier group. No one is celebrating. The encounter is being documented. Inside the carrier's combat information center, the tactical display remains crowded but stable. Surface tracks are sorted. The air picture is clean. Threat corridors are still being watched and prioritized, but they are no longer collapsing inward toward the formation. Sailors shift from immediate engagement decisions to battle damage assessment, electronic review, and rearm sequencing. Every intercept is time-stamped. Every radar emission is stored. Every second of the exchange is already being turned into record, evidence, and doctrine. That is how a U.S. carrier strike group finishes a fight. Not with noise, with control. On the flight deck, recovery crews are already restoring the rhythm of the ship. A Super Hornet appears first in the distance, small against the brightening sky, then grows quickly as it drops toward the angled deck. It catches the wire and slams aboard. Engines scream for a moment, then the aircraft folds back into the choreography of handlers, directors, and tow tractors. Another aircraft follows, then another. Wings fold, chains come out, fuel crews move, ordnance teams wait. The deck is alive again, not because the danger has disappeared, but because the mission never stopped. That image matters. Iran launched missiles at a U.S. aircraft carrier in one of the narrowest and most dangerous stretches of water in the Gulf. And the carrier is still launching and recovering aircraft, still holding course, still functioning. On the bridge, there is no speech and no theatrical declaration. The captain studies the water ahead, checks the tactical repeaters, and listens to short updates delivered in the clipped language of professionals who know better than to confuse survival with safety. Air wing recovery continuing. Outer screen stable. No new launches detected. Surface contacts north remain inside coastal envelope. Each report says the same thing in a different way. The strike group absorbed the attack. It identified the launch chain. It disabled the parts that mattered. And now it is still there. To port, the cruiser continues scanning the wider air picture, feeding the network without pause. Ahead of the carrier, the destroyer screen remains extended. Missile cells ready, guns manned, and electronic warfare teams still listening for anything that sounds like a second mistake from shore. A Seahawk patrols beyond the surface line, watching the northern approaches where the fast attack craft had tried to create pressure, only to hesitate and drift back toward their own coastline. The formation has not loosened. If anything, it looks tighter now, sharper, like a machine that has just proven itself under real pressure and come out even more focused. That is the real message moving through the strait this morning. Not the flashes, not the intercepts, not even the return strike. The message is that the first shot did not break the American formation. It clarified it. Inside CIC, one of the intelligence specialists finishes matching the last emitter logs from the engagement window. The takeaway is simple enough to say in one line, but significant enough to echo far beyond the strait. The missile strike revealed more than it achieved. Iranian launch patterns, radar discipline, reaction timing, relocation methods, everything used in those first minutes has now been captured, analyzed, and archived. They fired to stop a carrier. Instead, they showed the carrier group exactly how they operate. That is the kind of setback that lasts long after the smoke is gone. No one on the American ships needs to say it aloud. The evidence is all around them. The coastline that had flashed with fire control confidence is now electronically subdued. The patrol craft that tried to widen the pressure have already pulled back. The strike group's course through Hormuz remains unchanged. The blockade still stands. Not because of a speech, not because of a slogan, but because the ships are still there. Because the flight deck is still active, because the escorts are still screening, and because every effort to force the formation apart was met with layer after layer of discipline, precision, and controlled force. By 6:11, the sea looks almost normal again, at least from a distance. That is one of the strangest truths of naval combat. A person can stare across calm water and never realize how close that same surface came to becoming a disaster zone. But the people on these ships know. They heard the alarms. They watched the tracks close in. They felt the shock of the intercepts move across the water. And now they are watching the strait settle into a reality Iran failed to change. The U.S. carrier did not turn away. It did not disappear. It did not lose the initiative. It kept moving. And in the Strait of Hormuz, that is how power is measured. When the firing ends, the message is clear. Iran launched to break the blockade. Instead, it reinforced the one lesson every navy in the region already understands. Once a U.S. carrier strike group survives the opening strike, it becomes even harder to stop than it was before the attack began.